Most gardeners waste time turning compost that never needed turning in the first place. They build piles above ground, flip them every week, chase heat, and end up with dry edges, uneven decomposition, and nutrient loss through constant exposure. Then they wonder why their finished compost feels lifeless and why worm activity is minimal when they apply it. If you're serious about building biologically active compost without babysitting a pile all season, subscribe to Farm Logic. We test what actually works in soil, not what looks impressive in a gardening book. The forgotten pit method solves a problem most people don't realize they're creating. Above-ground piles lose moisture fast. Even when covered, airflow pulls moisture out. That forces you to water the pile repeatedly. Each time you turn it, you release heat and nitrogen in the form of ammonia, and that's fertility literally evaporating. The pit method flips the system. Instead of building upward, you dig downward. Soil becomes insulation. Moisture stabilizes naturally. Microbial life migrates in from all sides. And because temperature and moisture are balanced, turning becomes unnecessary. I've tested this in clay soil, sandy soil, and raised bed integration. In every case, the pit produced darker, more fungal-rich compost with less labor. Here's how I build it in a standard backyard setup. For a typical household generating kitchen scraps and garden waste, a pit about 3 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 2 feet deep is enough to handle steady input. That size holds roughly half a cubic yard of material once filled. Dig the pit directly in your garden area if possible. If you're working in a lawn, choose a future planting zone. The location matters because nutrients will migrate outward as decomposition progresses. Once the pit is open, I start with a 3-inch base layer of coarse browns, small branches, shredded stems, or dry corn stalks. That base improves airflow at the bottom without needing to turn later. Then I alternate layers of greens and browns just like a traditional pile, but with slightly more browns than most guides recommend. Aim for roughly 2 parts brown to 1 part green by volume. Kitchen scraps, fresh grass clippings, and green leaves count as greens. Shredded cardboard, dry leaves, straw, and sawdust count as browns. Each layer gets lightly moistened, not soaked. The goal is the feel of a wrung-out sponge. You let soil biology do the turning for you. Here's where the pit method outperforms surface piles. Soil microbes, fungi, insects, and worms naturally migrate into the material from all directions. The sides of the pit stay in contact with native soil, which is already biologically active. Within days, fungal threads begin penetrating the outer layers. Within 2 weeks in warm weather, worms start moving in from below if moisture is balanced. Because the pit is insulated by earth, temperature rises steadily but not excessively. In my tests, internal temperatures stabilize around 120 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit in the first phase, then gradually cool into the 90s as fungal decomposition takes over. You don't have to turn it because oxygen diffuses laterally through the soil walls and vertically through the layered material. This is slower than aggressive hot composting, but biologically richer. Let's be clear. If you need finished compost in 4 weeks, this isn't your system. A turned hot pile can break down faster if managed perfectly. But most gardeners don't manage piles perfectly. They overwater, underwater, or turn inconsistently. The pit method trades speed for stability and microbial diversity. In about 8 to 12 weeks during warm seasons, material breaks down into dark, crumbly compost with visible fungal strands and high worm activity. In cooler climates, it may take 12 to 16 weeks. The end product holds moisture better and integrates into soil more smoothly because it has already been in contact with native microbes. This works exceptionally well in raised beds. In a 4 by 8 foot raised bed that's at least 18 inches deep, I dig a trench down the center about 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. I fill it using the same layering method, then cover it with 4 to 6 inches of existing bed soil. You can plant directly above it after 2 to 3 weeks, especially heavy feeders like squash or tomatoes. Their roots will reach into the decomposing material mid-season. In one test bed, tomatoes planted over a pit trench showed noticeably stronger mid-season vigor compared to identical plants in beds amended with surface compost. The roots followed the nutrient gradient downward. In sandy soil, this method transforms structure. Sandy soils struggle with nutrient retention. Above-ground compost piles in sandy environments dry rapidly and require constant attention. With a pit, the surrounding sand helps regulate drainage, while the decomposing material increases organic matter directly where it's needed. After 2 cycles in the same location, I measured a visible improvement in crumb structure and moisture retention, extending about 12 inches outward from the original pit zone. You're not just making compost, you're conditioning soil in place. In clay soil, drainage must be considered. Clay holds water tightly. If you dig a pit in heavy clay without adjusting, you risk creating a saturated pocket. In that case, widen the pit slightly and mix a layer of coarse material, wood chips or small branches, into the bottom 4 inches. This improves drainage and airflow. You can also mix a small amount of finished compost into the clay walls to inoculate them and improve structure over time. The pit should never be waterlogged. If it smells sour or rotten, you've added too many greens or too much water. You don't need to chase heat for this to work. One common misconception is that compost must reach extreme temperatures to be effective. High heat is useful for killing weed seeds and pathogens, but it's not required for producing biologically active compost. The pit method operates in a moderate thermophilic range, followed by a long mesophilic fungal phase. That fungal phase is what builds stable humus. If weed seeds are a concern, avoid adding mature seeding weeds. Otherwise, trust the biological process. Why this method pairs well with worm activity. As the pit cools into the 80 to 90 degree range, worms move in aggressively. They fragment material and accelerate nutrient stabilization. In one 3 by 3 foot pit, I counted over 40 worms in a single spade slice after 3 months. That's a concentrated fertility engine under the soil surface. If your goal is living compost, not just decomposed material, the pit supports that transition naturally. You can scale this system across seasons. Instead of one large pit, some growers dig smaller pits sequentially across a garden bed over time. Each pit becomes a fertility hotspot. After harvesting crops above one pit, you start another in a different section. Over several seasons, you build distributed organic matter zones throughout the garden. In larger homestead settings, alternating pit locations prevents nutrient overload in one area and spreads soil improvement evenly. This is composting that works with gravity, moisture, and soil biology rather than against them. It's lazy in the best possible way. Lazy doesn't mean careless. It means efficient. Once the pit is layered and covered with 2 to 3 inches of soil, you leave it alone. No weekly turning, no constant watering. Rainfall and soil insulation handle moisture balance. Check it at the 8-week mark by digging into one side. If material is mostly dark and crumbly, with only a few recognizable pieces, it's ready to integrate. If it needs more time, cover it back and wait. That patience pays off in stability. If you're tired of managing compost like it's a chore and you want a system that builds bioactive, worm-rich material directly in your garden soil, try the pit method. And if you value grounded, field-tested methods that make growing better food simpler and more effective, subscribe to Farm Logic and share this with another serious grower. The more we understand how to work with soil biology instead of fighting it, the stronger our harvests become.